Hey, good morning, San Diego. Good morning, Facebook family. Eric Andersen, Chris George here in studio, and we just thanks for joining us. Like and share, ask questions. Going to be a fantastic message today, or not message, but conversation today. We're going to go live here in just a minute. We're a little bit late on time, so we're going to jump in. Then we'll look for questions. I'm going to have a bunch of links we put up, some recommended books we put up. There's some other good information coming your way. So if you can share, you know, a church leader, you're a pastor, you're a home group leader, share it with them because it's going to be relevant. And then we're going to copy it and we can send them the recording from the podcast or reference them to the podcast. Good morning. It is May 30th, 2020, and America is reeling. 72 days ago, March 19th, where worship, work, and life as we knew it shifted. The crisis shows up, and most of America responded well. And definitely San Diegans responded well. 255 tragic deaths. In my heart, and the hearts of many go out to each and every family affected by the illness. And not to diminish the deaths at all. There has been a history of pandemics about every 15 years since the 1600s. But none has had the impact this one has had on the lives of the healthy. The inability to worship, inability to work, the removal of liberties. And there's a lot more info on that if you were interested and you wanted to unpack it on a podcast called Well-Versed World Podcast. Jim Garlow, David Barton, and you can jump into that. This today is an invitation to pastors to listen to. You can email for more information. We're going to discuss positions that are not politically correct. Your congregation wants to know what the Bible has to say about government, about politics. This will sting a bit, but we have Christians that have been quiet, maybe because the pulpit's been quiet. I know that's not politically correct, but the difference, we're going to talk about the difference between just and legal, the purpose of government and the role of elected official. And in Romans 13, which I've seen it spoke on recently, rulers are not a terror to good conduct. We will make a copy of this available. There's actually a podcast, and if you want to send it to a pastor, if you're live on Facebook and you want to invite somebody that's a home group leader, a church leader, a pastor, let us know and we'll get you the information. Chris George's page, Eric Andersen's page, live on Facebook, live on AM 1170. The principles we're going to discuss are not exclusive to Christians either. There is prosperity, freedom, and blessings in the principles, regardless of what you believe. My guest today is Eric Andersen, my friend, a man who's a leader, an encourager, and a friend. And Eric is a political blogger. He's on the Central Committee for 71st District. He's a state farm agent. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Graduated Loyola Marymount University, and is engaged in the lives of men, sharing truth. So Eric's with me today in studio, and I want to welcome you. Introduce yourself, please. Say hi.
Thank you for having me. I'm an admirer of yours, and you're touching on a subject that we're not real prepared to discuss. So I just appreciate you having the courage to bring up church and state issues. I think it's needed.
Well, we're going to jump in, prepared or ill-prepared. From your perspective, your opinion, what's the purpose of law and the role of government?
That's a great question. So often we get into a discussion about right and wrong without first defining our terms. So law is the collective organization of the individual's right to self-defense. So the position I come to is that life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, property, those are gifts God gives to all men. And since all men are equal, they have a natural right to defend life, liberty, and property. Because we're all equal, it's immoral to initiate aggression against a neighbor. So since you and I have the individual right to defend our life and our liberty and our property, it follows that we can elect Tom down the street to organize that defense for us at our consent. Those are the words of our declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. So we see there our framers positing something with Enlightenment background, with a Christian background, that rights precede the state, and the role of the state is simply at the consent of the governed to defend what God has given us. Since the magistrate, the lawmaker, is simply defending at our consent, it follows logically that he doesn't have any rights that we can't give him. Mm-hmm. So if I can't come over to your and Debbie's house and tell you what to cook or what color to paint your house, it follows that the magistrate cannot either. So law is simply the collective organization of the individual's right to self-defense.
So just, I'm going to unpack for the layman, or I'm going to have you unpack. It says in Romans 13, uses a reference magistrate. Define that. Just
okay, any lawmaker. So I could be a judge or a lawmaker. Federal level, state level, municipal level.
Any other elected officials fit in that box?
Anybody that's elected.
Anybody that's elected.
Anyone that can make a law.
Okay. Okay. So right now there is a lot of conversation about churches being able to worship, about people going back to work, about the need, useful or not useful, I'm not sure, being made to wear face masks. There's just a lot around the COVID issues. And so can a Christian biblically disobey the law?
That calls into question, is the law just? So if we go back to 1963, to Birmingham, and we're in jail with a black man who's got a newspaper and he's writing on the edges, and he's responding to 8 white pastors who were castigating him for his peaceful march. And he wrote in Letter to a Birmingham Jail, everything Hitler did was legal. Everything Hitler did was legal. So if we have to obey all laws, Martin Luther King shouldn't have marched. Mm-hmm. If we have to obey all laws, then Christ should have submitted to the Pharisees. If we have to obey all laws, then the Athenian government should not have forced Socrates to drink hemlock. If we obey all laws, Cicero shouldn't have had his head cut off for speaking about the laws of nature from the Senate. So what the Christian hasn't been taught is how to discern what is legal from what is just. And that's what Martin Luther King was touching upon. That's why Augustine said an unjust law is no law at all. So if the law that our magistrate makes, who is God's ministering servant, 3 times, Romans 13, 1 through 7, his law is consistent with higher law. That's where all authority comes. But the second I make a law that's inconsistent, that denies you your natural rights that you're given from God.
Property right, any right.
If I encroach on your rights, I'm no longer a magistrate with authority on God's shoulders, any more than in my jurisdiction at my home. I'm the head of my household when I'm submitted to God, and my family follows. But if I tell my family we're going to go next door and violate the 8th commandment and raid my neighbor's refrigerator, at that point I have the position of authority, but I don't have the authority because I'm no longer on Christ's shoulders. So just as I lose authority when I'm not submitted, just as my pastor, if he doesn't preach sound doctrine, loses authority, he has the position, but the elders and the body better question him if he doesn't preach sound doctrine. So must the state hold the magistrate to higher law. The state's got it as Christ at its head, just as the church did. They're just 2 different spheres.
So the principle, submission to higher law, governed through the magistrate. We've had some conversation offline about Well, what if you're not a Bible believer?
Yeah.
How does it affect the atheist? How does it affect the Buddhist? How does it affect? How does it affect if you're not a Bible believer?
Well, those are great questions, because the truth is, I'm in the minority. My neighbors are the majority. My unbelieving neighbors are the majority. When we look at the state's role is not to grow the kingdom. That's the church's job. And the church does that through prayer and love and preaching the gospel. The state's role is defensive. Remember, it gets its power from the consent of the governed. So it's simply to defend. It's very simple and limited to that. That's why government is limited, because my rights are limited and it operates at my consent. So what I have to wrestle with, I've been working through these last few years, is I'm a citizen of heaven, and I'm simultaneously a citizen down here in the temporal world, and how do I mesh or fuse those two things together? The reason that this political philosophy is not offensive to the unbeliever is because the role of the state is defensive. It protects my neighbor's right to property. He knows instinctively that his property is sanctified. He knows instinctively that his life is sanctified. He knows instinctively that all men must be equal under the law. And he doesn't need Exodus 20 to tell him that. He sees it in nature, and that's what was so powerful when Jefferson was quoting Cicero in the preamble to the Declaration, when he writes those 7 words as the basis for our judicial system: the laws of nature and nature's God. Because what my unbelieving neighbors see in nature and know instinctively, that Paul talks about, I believe, in Romans 1 or 2, the Christian sees specifically revealed in the law. And in that way, my unbelieving neighbors and I can coexist in peace, because we're looking at a transcendent. Because if we don't have a transcendent law, we're left with democracy, aristocracy, general will, Rousseau, and we're arguing, in every aspect of our lives is politicized, and that's the problem. We're tired of having our lives politicized. And we need to ask, what's the solution?
So the individual protection, defense of rights just trickles, is the collective society's protection. Yeah, I mean, it's been inverted. There's these declarations to the collective is more important than the individual, and it's inverted. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've gone from Locke, which is who Jefferson wrote about, to Rousseau. So if you're a Christian, you believe in a creator, therefore that creator is sovereign, and therefore we're made in his image, the Imago Dei, and therefore our gifts are inalienable, and there's consequences for that belief. The law has to uphold those individual rights to be consistent with higher authority. But if there is no creator, and not all unbelievers feel this way, even if you don't believe there's a creator, you instinctively know by nature that you have rights. But if you no longer have a creator, and we've got a secular education that pushes that out, and we're no longer challenging it, it's sanctified because the government's doing it, then we start to develop political philosophies that unknowingly are incoherent with our religious views. And so we abort the individual, because that's what the general will democracy is. It's 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what they're going to have for lunch. So you move classically, we were a nation built on individual rights. That's why the preamble says all men are created equal, endowed by their creator. But today, we talk about the collective and keeping it secure and stable. So what most conservatives that I run into in politics, they're conserving the status quo, the stability. That's what it's all about. They rarely talk about the individual created in the Imago Dei. And what's beautiful about that is when you get your philosophy and your economics and your law consistent, you outright the right and you outleft the left. How do you outright the right? Because you more consistently uphold those God-given gifts. You're not politicizing them, negotiating, or compromising them. And how do you outleft the left? Because the smallest minority, Chris, is the individual. It's powerful.
So we're going to go to break, we're talking about law, truth, just law. legal versus justice, and we will be right back. There's a lot of information here. We have some book links, some information for you. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you in a minute. Facebook, thanks for joining in. If you have any questions, I don't know if we have any questions yet.
We do. Let me move this up just a little bit so we're not interfering with there. Nor Shaba, just a shout out, says, hello, precious man of God, Chris, bless you and bless your quest. I love that verbiage on there. He wrote more, so you'll have to read that later.
Thank you, Nor.
Barry Jantz, Eric, wants you to help a common thinker like him, and most of us, understand in layman's terms something that you wrote on Rostra. So it says, you're quoted from your article, I hold that the civil magistrate is included in let every person. The authority is not the individual magistrate, it is higher law and or the institution of government when submitted to such.
So let's do that. I'm going to need you to reread that because it's too lengthy, and we'll do it on air. And
yes. Okay.
Yeah,
That was a great man.
Barry.
Bless you, Barry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good stuff.
I get excited.
Today. Thanks for watching, Chad. Thanks, Barry. Nor. Hey, Raylene. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Got any questions? Some good stuff today. We're going to put some links for books recommended. Also, I mentioned earlier, if you're just tuning in, about if there's a pastor, a church leader, a home fellowship leader, somebody that would be like-minded, like-hearted, that would like to learn more about what we're talking about, what Eric's sharing, email me, message us. We'll get you a copy of the podcast. You can send them, or Eric generously offered to have coffee. Meet with somebody, have coffee. So if you want to chime in and share that, would be happy to sit down and have a conversation. So just FYI. So reach out if you think there's somebody that think needs to hear this, or you're out there and you want some more information on how law and economics and theology fit together, and how we're shying away from stuff. We're shying away from social justice, and we're shying away from civil disobedience, and we're shying away from things that are politically correct because it's risky, and the feedback is or the opposition is mammoth. So. Which it shouldn't be. But anyways, so we're back live here. Welcome back. Welcome back. If you're listening on radio, thank you. If you're on Facebook Live, Chris George is the page, or Eric Andersen is my guest in studio. Fascinating topic about government's role. And so just a real quick, the show's sponsored by Team Kia, Team Mazda of El Cajon. Rolling into June, coming out of May, we're still in the middle of COVID. Thank you those of you that have come and shopped and bought from us or considered us. We are grateful. We know we need to earn the right to do business with you. And I think the greatest privilege is doing business with you a second time, because we earn the right twice. We have a couple promotions, a $5 car sale I'm running this month. $5 down delivers on any new or used car, and $5 a day for a new 2020 Optima, or $5 a day for a new 2020 Kia Forte. And then I have about 20 to 25 cars, $5 down for $99 a month on some pre-owned, and $5 down for $149 a month, and no payments till September. So we have a 2015 Mitsubishi Mirage. It's got 31,000 miles. 2016 Nissan Versa. 2015 Kia Rio LX, 2013 Dodge Grand Caravan SXT, 2014 Hyundai Elantra GT, and we have many more on the way, and we just bought 50 cars in the last few days, so we've got more coming. $5 car sale the month of June. We'll start it today, and tomorrow's the last day of May. We need to get going. So I'm sitting here talking to Eric Andersen, and we're talking about the purpose of law and the role of government. Can a Christian, is civil disobedience permitted? And we talking, what's the difference between just and legal? right? And then we had a question when we were off air, and I wanted to read that right now from one of the person on Facebook. So would you read that, producer Tammy?
Barry Jantz, who was actually a studio guest a few weeks ago, asked if Eric might be able to interpret for the common thinker in layman terms something that you wrote on SD Rostra. And that quote was, "I hold that the civil magistrate is included in let every person. The authority is not the individual magistrate. It is a higher law or the institution of government when submitted to such."
So, one of the things that we believe as Christians is the doctrine of depravity, the sinful nature. That's why we'll never have heaven on earth. But what we don't realize is that my neighbor has the same sinful nature I have on Monday. Then he gets elected on Tuesday. We'll call his name Tommy Smith. So Tommy gets elected on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Tommy becomes a civil magistrate. And at that point, because he's magistrate and Christians are taught to submit to the governing authorities, Tommy can print money, he can take away our right to education, how we worship, when we worship. And I'm saying that I believe is an inconsistent reading of Romans 13:1. And the reason I care about Romans 13:1 so much is we have so much access to the gospel in this nation, and yet we're heading towards more poverty and tyranny. And the question is why? And I think it comes back to Romans 13:1. Romans 13:1 reads, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities." Let every person. And do you know what every person is in Greek? Same as it is in French and Spanish. It's every person. So just because Tommy becomes a magistrate on Tuesday doesn't move him out of Romans 13:1. So let every person be subject to the governing authorities then becomes not just me, but my neighbor who becomes a magistrate on Tuesday is every person. He has to submit to the governing authorities. Then the question becomes, what's the governing authority? Is God talking about the individual? Because if we talk about the individual, then the believers got to obey Ahab back in Old Covenant Israel. He's got to obey Hitler, Nero. The scriptures break down because the magistrate's supposed to be on Christ's shoulders. What I believe the believers should be doing when they look at this verse is let every person be subject to the higher authority. And that could either be higher law, perfect law from I am. That's the only authority. And matter of fact, that's what Paul says here. For there's no authority except from God. So when every person is subject to the governing authority, it's not just me. It's my neighbor Tommy, who was just elected on Tuesday, who's doubly dangerous today because now he's not just depraved, but he has the ability to social engineer society in a way that could take away rights. But God ordains the institution. The institution of government is ordained. It has a place in society. And I'm not seeing that worked out consistently, and I think that ends up putting a pastor in a pietistic position and granting, in essence, a different ethic. And so that God has one ethic for me and another ethic for the magistrate because he's not every person subjected to higher authority. And now you've got division and you create tension, and we should all be marching under the same authority. All men created equal. Endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Just because my neighbor doesn't believe in God doesn't mean he's not entitled to equal protection under the law. But if we break down that operating system and we no longer care about the individual, then it's a free-for-all. And we're in arguing and we're politicizing our lives every day, and before we know it, we're tithing 3 times what we give to the church, to the state, and they're making it worse. You know, our nation isn't going the right direction. It's not working. And the Christian needs to figure out, how can I be salt and light in the civil sphere? And it requires peace. It requires wisdom. It takes, these are new concepts. We've had 30, 40, 50 years to establish frameworks that really aren't working. We're in a glorified, in my realm, in politics, we're in a glorified realm of popularity, yet we don't have any knowledge of law or economics, and we're writing the laws. Now, you can't get in a plane without the pilot going to flight school. You can't practice surgery without med school, but we have good men doing what's best in their own eyes that have no idea about higher law. or economics,
Mhm.
or theology.
Mhm.
And look what we get. I don't know if that was layman enough, but
So the Bible says, I even think it's there. The address is there in Romans. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's.
Mhm.
Doesn't that mean, again, we're beating it a little bit, but what's our Caesar?
well, because the Bible says,
Is
give
it
us-
Gavin, right? Is it
Well,
President Trump? What's our Caesar?
to some it might be. I think we probably have brothers that are better Christians than I am that hold those truths. I'm sure they do. Because the Bible says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, we have to obey. But the question is, who is Caesar? So if we go back to the first part of what Paul writes, he writes, let every person be subject to higher authority, for there is no authority except from God. So here in this nation, we ask the question, what's our highest authority? It's the U.S. Constitution. So I would say that it's a U.S. Constitution, especially when it's consistent with higher law from I am.
Mhm.
So give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Well, that requires what is Caesar's. And that's the trap that the lawmakers of Jesus' time tried to put him in.
Mhm.
Men who took Jesus' law, took it out of the hands of the common man, and corrupted it. So only a small class of people. It's the same thing we've done to law today. We've taken this simple law, we the people, the Constitution, and we've let a judicial class corrupt it so that even right to trial by jury doesn't work. I was in a federal, what's it called, avoir? Can't remember the French word, when they're picking out their jury. And I asked a question, I quoted John Adams. I said, do I still have the ability to judge a just from an unjust law? Immediately, the council, 3 of them on each side, went to the corner of the judge's bench, met for 2.5 minutes, came back and said,
Dismissed.
Great way to get dismissed from jury duty, but that wasn't my intent. My intent was to uphold higher law.
So if you have any questions, you can type in them on Facebook Live. We could do a call in 888-344-1170. Brendan's in there and he can answer that call and pipe it through. But 888-344-1170. We're going to go to a break right now. We'll be back in a minute. We're talking about law. We're talking about the role of government. And we're talking about just versus legal and a number of other topics. So we will be back in a minute. Thanks for joining us. See you momentarily.
You know what might tag on that if you want, is it says give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and pay all that is owed to them. Taxes are owed, revenue to who revenue is owed. So that becomes a justification to the believer to submit to the magistrate and give whatever the law is.
Chris, I don't see where on the Trello board you have that number, so I have to keep asking you. So can you, so I can type it again here and then I'll save it on our Trello board, please?
The phone number?
Yes.
Right there on the glass.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, Facebook guys, thanks. Sorry, we got waylaid there. Our guy missed the commercial. Anyways, we're in progress, right? So if you have any questions, again, we're 888-344-1170 if you want to call in. Answer your question on the spot. The role of government, just versus legal. How law, economics, and theology can create a lattice work or framework to really cut through the fog of the political circumstances, through social justice, through the mandate of equal outcomes, which is that's another topic in itself. So please, if you want to jump in, again, this we're going to ask in a minute. I'm going to ask Eric and what can we say and share with pastors to equip. To prepare to communicate or pursue them, or they want to pursue more knowledge of how these intertwine and roll together. So thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys. Fire away if you have any questions, and we will going to be live here in just a second. did you want to expound on that?
I'm afraid I probably go too deep.
taxes
I'm
and
actually talking a lot, and
No,
I
it's
need to
good.
apologize to you.
No need. It's good. It's good. Good.
Not unless Barry comes back up and says,
Huh?
try it again.
Barry said it was good. He said thank you.
Good. I respect that man.
Welcome back, San Diego, day 72, shelter in place, and we are here in studio AM 1170 with my guest, EricAndersen, political blogger on the San Diego roster. If you want to look into that, you can just Google that and check that out. He also is a State Farm agent here in San Diego. Debbie and my wife have our home insurance with him, so we do business with Eric, implicitly trust him. And what do you need to protect? Your home, your car, or cars, your life insurance. If something happens, you have the protection you need in place to replace your property or replace your income. Are you young, married with family, and you make 40 or 30 or 50 or 60 or 100 grand a year, and God forbid something happened to you, you need something in place to take care of your family and to take care of your wife. She's working, she's not working, there's going to be added expenses. Your kids want to go to college, and if typically our plans don't work out the way we thought we were gonna, and he can help walk you through that, build something that will put the protection in place, peace of mind for taking care of what you and I have been given. That's prudent and good stewardship. Eric, so most societies, I wrote this a little different. Most societies get the leadership in government they deserve, and or because there's been silence. Can you speak to that in the context of compromise?
Yeah, well, I believe that's true.
Pardon?
I believe that's true. I don't believe the problem is Washington. I don't believe the problem is Sacramento. I believe the problem is me. And that's why, as a believer, I'm called, when I love Christ, not just to love him with all my heart and all my strength. I think most of us are pretty good at that, relatively speaking. It's loving with our mind that is difficult. There's been a general movement from the Reformation to the present, away from intellect, from creeds, to more of an emotionalism feel, and we've lost some of the mind. The Christian should be the most intelligent person in the town square, doing what Thoreau, an unbeliever, said is not thousands hacking at the branches, but the ones striking at the root. The Christian, using the academic disciplines of theology, law, and economics, should be able to identify these issues at their core. We talk about some of the problems we have with marriage, we talk about prayer in schools, but if we had time to discuss them, I would point that they all stem from the root issue, which is a violation of the 8th commandment. You violate the 8th commandment and start redistributing property, you get power groups, and you end up with these problems that we're trying to fight up here. So when it comes to compromise, it's getting back to our philosophy. It's getting back to our operating system, to use a word that in a tech world, operating system. The operating system that our country was created upon, the operating system that Jefferson was writing about because he was reading Hobbes and Rutherford and Cicero, was one that posited a creator, individuals created in his image with inalienable rights. That's important. Inalienable rights that can't be taken away. That creates one law system. That created the most prosperous law system in 5,000 years of human history. And our move away from that has created the poverty and the tyranny. But compromise comes when we we worship and believe those things on Sunday, but when we come out on Monday, we no longer uphold those ideals as those exceptional ideals that made America great as inalienable, and we compromise them.
So how do you cut through the chatter? You got a political race. You got November coming up. We just went through the elections in March, and this sounds right. This sounds right. Or the fact you cannot read the voter guide because it's packed in and complicated, And if you're interested, it's hard to dissect. I mean, so how does one prepare or equip or cut through the chatter of, and then you wind up voting for, I think the quote I heard you say is that what is it? The lesser of two evils. What is that quote?
You're right. It's not a quote. It's just that it's a doctrine I run into quite often. The role of the magistrate is just voting for the lesser of two evils. Well, that's a hopeless philosophy. It can never transform or reform. It can only slow down decline, and that's what we see.
So what could that mean? Not voting? Could that mean abstinence from? I'm not picking. This is bad. This is not as bad, but bad.
Right.
And so
I'm not going to have a real great answer on this, but I'll share with you my opinion, and I'm going to quote Francis Schaeffer, theologian, philosopher, died in '84. Francis Schaeffer said that Christianity isn't conservative, it's revolutionary. So I'm going to give you a revolutionary response. But I'm more concerned with my vertical relationship than my horizontal relationship with my neighbor. I think my horizontal relationship is a function of my vertical relationship. So it has taken us 30, 40, 50 years to come up with these philosophies that we work at. And I think it's foolish to think that I can change my neighbor, or my wife, let alone my neighbor's ideas quickly. And so all I can say is Thomas Jefferson could not get endorsed in the San Diego 71st to the 50th today. His values, that's how far we've flown. We're great at the quoting
rhetoric.
Yeah. And that rhetoric is all we need. You give rhetoric,
a good narrative.
You get a block of votes.
Good narrative sells.
And then you go look at, you look at Congressman Hunter's vote. He was conservative, but he got a 69% in the 115th Congress. And what did we do? We're now endorsing Isa, who in that same 115th got a 60%. That's an F.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you correct that?
Mm-hmm.
How do I correct I can't. So my approach as a believer and a recovering controller, not in an accounting sense, I can't control you or my neighbor. So I'm just working on me. And if I can blog or I get invited, but I'm ordinary. I can only do ordinary things. Rosa Parks could only do ordinary things. She could get on that bus in Montgomery in 1955, go 5 rows down, turn to left, sit down, and then she's told to get out of the seat. And she refuses, and all of a sudden we got a civil rights movement. That lady didn't get up that morning to start a nationwide movement, but our God can take an individual standing still and just trying to obey. When I die, I don't believe Christ is going to say, did you change El Cajon of East County? He's going to say, did you submit? And that's in Metaxas's book about Bonhoeffer. They questioned Bonhoeffer. He was part of the Confessing Church. When the whole church capitulated, there's a whole other story. What do we have to learn from the Christian church capitulating to Hitler in Germany, but not in Norway under Bergeraff? It's great timing now.
There's examples, right? History.
He who forgets it, Santayana, is condemned
to repeat it.
Thank you.
So you look at Rosa Parks, you look at Jordan Peterson. You know, I look at these people that stepped. There's a seat. It was available. She didn't affect anybody else on that bus. Jordan Peterson says, hey, I'm not going to be made to address him or her as her or him. I might, out of respect, if I believe him, but I'm not going to be made to. So he's not encroaching on anybody's right, and they wind up creating this revolutionary outcome organically, as our friend Mike said. I lost my train of thought. So compromise, is it necessary? Oh, where I was going with that was, all right, to prepare, say we want to prepare, so it resonates with somebody's heart today. Hey, I want to understand this. I want to understand, and I want to cut through the clutter of the campaigns. And where do I begin?
Yeah.
And this is a long road, right? So it's, to say by November is probably not fair, because there's the depth and the breadth.
Right.
Where does somebody begin to educate themselves, get the material? San Diego, I don't know, the Rostra maybe?
Yeah, Rostra is great. But you're going to, the idea is, how do we do what's right? How do we do what shows God gratitude for what he did on the cross? Because that's my goal. My goal is to try to figure out my faith in this secular, pluralistic world.
Yes.
How do I demonstrate gratitude? And that's my whole, and I think very difficult because even as believers we don't agree.
No, yeah.
So how can I come into that? So it's discussions like this. So I think, as an individual, you could, if you could begin reading, but the problem is, again, it's not sacramental. We got to reform my own mind before I can reform my neighbor. So how do I reform my mind, Chris? That's kind of getting back to your question. So I can, if a mind isn't reformed, I can't identify the Jefferson in the group.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I first got to take responsibility for reforming my own mind, learning to love God, not just my heart and soul, but with my mind. I would read Bastiat on law. I would read Kuiper Stone lectures at Princeton in 1898, his Calvinism and politics. Sphere authority. I've never even heard of sphere authority until, 10, 12 years ago. Martin Luther King's Letter from a Birmingham Jail is important. Whatever Happened to Justice. These are books that are skinny and thin that basically challenge our conservatism.
What are you conserving?
What are you conserving? Beautiful. To really uphold godly ideals. And that's what we conserve. So, again, I take a lot of the pressure off. I encourage the leaders about me that you're not responsible for changing El Cajon. You're not responsible for changing East County or San Diego. What you're responsible for is reforming and transforming your own mind so that you're glorifying God better day by day.
So I think for me, I'm talking with people that are younger than me, my age, that are a lot further along than me, and then I'm talking to people that are wanting to learn also. So you had a matrix of, I want to call it jurisdiction or spheres, right? So the 4 boxes. Illustrate the 4 boxes and unpack that a little bit, because I think that's foundational to what you're talking about.
Yeah, this is a framework that gets us in a lot of trouble if we don't. I find it gets to the root. As we said, throw thousands hacking into the branches to the one striking at the root. I look at church and state issues in a framework. This comes from Kuiper Stone lectures in 1898. God is the only one that is sovereign. He has unlimited authority and power over all. As Kuiper says, there's not 1 inch in the whole domain of human existence that Christ doesn't call out mine. So beautiful. And when you think about that, if I say Christ is sovereign, the follow-through is that every area of life, including politics, should bring him glory. If God is sovereign, then the question becomes how. So in that context, you have, I'll make a square that represents all of God's authority. And if you ask my neighbor in church today, what is government, he's probably going to bring up the state. But if you went back 100 years and you ask a believer about government, their answer would be church, self, family, estate. We can get back to it after the break.
Want to get back to that, and I want to, we're going to talk about, if we're going to oppose masks, why not oppose the speed limit? I love that. We'll be right back. San Diego, hang on. Facebook guys, thanks for joining in.
Jason San Augustine from your page, Eric, says he's loving your responses.
Who's this?
Jason San Augustine.
Oh, hi, Jason.
Very good. Rachel Etzminger Lloyd, good stuff. She comes in every week.
Rachel,
or so.
thank you very much for your support.
North Shaba, again, put a comment. She said her opinion is we missed our power and authority because we submit our right to the government the moment we became under 401
501c.
CR. Yeah, she put 401 CR, but maybe 501(c). Yes, very good.
So a lot of things said, right? A lot of references. We're not going to have time to list them all as far as the books.
I did list all the books in the comment sections for
verbally.
All the, yes.
So you'll be able to grab them in the comments. So Bastiat in the Law, Hazlitt and Economics in One Lesson.
Well done.
Kuiper's book on sphere authority. That's fascinating topic of jurisdiction. If you haven't thought about it, and it's relevant because the jurisdiction starts in our homes, really starts with our person. At the end of the day, that's what we're really responsible for. So, and then it expands from there. I think what success looks like, right? For a family, for our kids, as a married couple with grown kids, as a grandparent, what success looks like, as your kids go off. Did we prepare them? So some questions, thought-provoking questions. And then big question, just versus legal and social justice, and how the three strand of law, economics,
Quite
and,
a few strands. Yeah.
right? So we'll be right. We're going to go back on the air in a sec.
Are we going to go back to jurisdiction?
Well, you were yeah. Once
Started, but I heard that.
yeah. Please finish that. So I'm going to do a quick shout out to hey, I'm gonna on Facebook, guys. In El Cajon, there's a guy, Mona Vala Pizza. Food's good, lots to choose from. They'll deliver. Tiny little place behind El Pollo Loco on Broadway. But you walk in there, and Rocky and his sister and his sister-in-law, they're making the food. They say hi to you. Fabulous selection of drinks. Sodas, hard stuff, blah, blah, blah. But super nice people. And went in there last week and had a salad and a nice salad sandwich. And just want to encourage you to support them. They're grinding it out. Hey, good morning, San Diego. Welcome back. Sitting here with EricAndersen, talking about law, economics, and theology, how government, church, and business can coexist and interact. And it's brought to you by Team Kia of El Cajon, Team Maz of El Cajon. We're working on a third franchise, so we'll let you know when that happens. But we are grateful to have the platform, grateful for your business. A friend of mine, Laban's Landscaping, Mike Laban, took me to a place the other night, Mona Vala Pizza. It's on Broadway, right behind El Pollo Loco, 500 Broadway, Suite B. Little hole in the wall, sliding screen that like barely works. You go in there and there's these refrigerator cases that are 15 feet long, full of hard this and hard that and ginger this, beer and just sodas and all kinds of, just one of the bigger selections I've seen. So you can get pizzas, you can get wings, you can get calzone, you can get sandwiches, you can create your own, you can get pastas. You can get a salad, but what was the food was good. What was the best? Rocky behind there working the cashier apron on, his sister in the back putting the salads together, his sister-in-law in the back putting the salads together, right there in El Cajon, right behind El Pollo Loco, and working hard. Would love you to show up and support them. We were talking about jurisdiction. Back to Eric. Wanted you to kind of finish that thought, and then we'll get into masks and speeding.
So one of the things we have a problem with is connecting limited government and God's sovereignty. So God is the only one with a limited authority and sovereignty and power. Man, because we're sinners, are separated into individual governments and jurisdictions, and we need to understand that. So the Bible doesn't mention one government, it mentions four, with their own leadership structures accountable to Christ. So we read in Romans 13, state government, accountable, only one authority to Christ. Family government, church government, and self-government. And each of those has a jurisdiction. And if we can't define theologically, consistently with law, those jurisdictions, then we allow the magistrate to make laws outside his jurisdiction, and we submit to him because we don't understand sphere authority, we don't understand Romans 13 in a way that's commensurate. So we understand family government. We understand that the father's the head of the household. He needs to submit to Christ. When he's not submitted to Christ, he has a position but not the authority. That he can't go to his next door neighbor and tell them what to eat or paint their house. We understand family, government, and jurisdiction. We also understand church government. My church elders can't tell your church elders what doctrine to preach, and vice versa. We would never do that. We understand church government. But when it comes to the state, we throw it all out the window. Though we wouldn't follow the family head or the church head when they're not on Christ's authority, we allow the magistrate to do whatever they wish. So we, in effect, create a second ethic. And so when we don't have a definition of rights and the role of government, the role of the state grows, and this is where it hurts. When the state grows, it automatically encroaches on the other three. And that's what we see. And it becomes our God, our idol.
The other three diminish.
Because it's a fixed space.
The state grows.
And family
the other
shrinks.
three diminish.
And we look at what's happened. We had 8 out of 10 moms at home in 1963. That's not the case today. So as the state grows, because we look to it as God and to solve our problems, the conservative doesn't even discuss how to self-individualize it, address things now. We're looking to the state. But every time the state does it, it takes more out of our paycheck because it's got to feed itself. Well, the more you do that, you ruin the economy and you destroy the family. Two-thirds of the second table of the law, the Ten Commandments, addresses property and family. Why would our God address property and family so thoughtfully? Yet, our families are being destroyed and our property is going to the state. And we're shrinking the spheres that God depends on to give us the character to self-govern.
State, family, church, and self, jurisdictions. The increase of one box means the decrease of another.
That's right. Or the increase of one box. You can't increase one box without shrinking the others.
The pie is limited.
Yes.
Right? The quadrants are limited. So the mom at home, price real estate's expensive, but the 30-40+% of taxes taken out.
You can't even private school if you want, because the state's taken all your property now. There used to be no income tax 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. We became the most prosperous nation without income tax. Now we're tithing to the state 3 times what we tithe. And how does she even advance and have a private school when she's got to fund the state system that's undermining her?
And maybe I'm duplicating, but I'm thinking of our friend Andrew Hayes, Lakeside School Board, and voting against a bond measure, sole voice.
Beautiful.
Sole voice, and 2/3 of the people and more than that, you might remember the exact number, don't even have kids in school but are being taxed for that. And the homeowners in Lakeside, the tax was $166 a year for a bond measure, $166 per household per year. He says no, sole voice, as I recall, maybe one other, to penalize 2/3 or 3/4 of the residents in Lakeside because they don't have kids in school.
It's a monopoly.
It's
they're forcing you
coercion.
to purchase a product that they're not using. That's not American. That's not exceptional. That doesn't uphold our natural rights, our God-given rights. It violates parental rights. And we're trying to get our Christians to be in charge of it. Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah.
I'm a total believer in Andrew Hayes, though. He's got the right ideas. He's one of them that's reforming his mind. He's way ahead of the game. He's brave, he's thoughtful, and he's young, and he's going places.
Talented, funny, self-professed geek, and proud of it, and just kind as can be and smart as a whip. All right, I'm going to transition. We're running out of time. So if we're going to, I love this, so we're going to oppose masks. Why not oppose the speed laws?
Yeah. When our speed laws are protecting our natural rights, life and property, from a significant risk, and it's not encroaching on my rights to drive 55 or 65 or 45. But masks, it hasn't been demonstrated to be a significant risk, at least more than the flu, and it's encroaching on my right to associate, my freedom to trade. So, the speed limit laws protect my life and property without encroaching on my rights from a significant risk to life and property. The mask hasn't been demonstrated to be protecting me from a significant risk, and it violates my natural rights.
So they say it's safer. It's trying to keep you safe. And then if there's a couple of things here, and if you don't, call the law enforcement and turn you in. I don't. So speak to the safer.
Well, I ask him to define his terms. We've got a county board of supervisor that has a whole different idea on what is fair. He strips me of my inalienable rights. Yes. So his operating system is totally different. So I'm going to challenge him on where did I lose my inalienable rights? And what is his authority? Because his power comes from the consent of the governed. And if I don't have the power, he doesn't have it to use. Government is necessarily limited. So I believe all men are equal, but I don't believe all ideas are morally valid. And I believe his operating system is a failure, and it's the reason we're heading more and more towards poverty and tyranny. And the solution is for us as believers to start reforming our own minds and reforming ourselves so we can better love our neighbor and become salt and light in the civil sphere.
So a doctrine of civil disobedience. A couple weeks ago on Jim Garlow's show, if you want to do Well-Versed podcast, we're talking a little bit about it now because we're challenging the status quo. Nathan Fletcher says last week, I believe, it's time to give up our liberties to keep others safe. And holy mackerel, it doesn't work that way. But the point is, what we do, how we engage, whether you're a believer or not, these principles are transcendent.
Amen. Amen.
I mean, So I just want to encourage you. If there's a pastor out there, if there's a church leader, I can't think of anybody who couldn't use this, but I really think of those people that have a platform to constituents in the sphere, in the theology sphere, would want to equip themselves with some of this thinking, and it's not readily available. Eric's made himself available. If you want to have coffee, you can email myself, email Tammy, you can email EricAndersen, State Farm Agent. Be happy to have coffee. So we're going to sign out and say thank you. Brought to you by Team Kia, Team Maz of El Cajon. I want to thank Eric for joining us and some of the concepts and idea. It was an honor to have you here. Want to encourage all of you out there in the Radio Land in San Diego, just head up. This is going to pass. Something we can do, we could pray. Something we could do, we could just love on each other and give each other a little bit of grace. So love you guys. We will see you next week. Appreciate you tuning in on Facebook and then on the radio. We will talk to you soon. Have a great weekend. Facebook Live, thank you.
I have to say loud and clear, about 15 seconds before you both jumped in on the Andrew Hayes, he put a comment on Eric's that said, "You guys rock, love you." So he put that there. I want you to know that that comment was there before either of you even mentioned it. So.
It was an honest comment. Andrew, we appreciate you. Gosh, Phil Ortiz, Andrew Hayes, huh?
The other thing I think is kind of important to know, and maybe next week we'll put on air, is all of these different companies that you're recommending, the pizza place, Le Bon's, Eric, etc. No one pays you to do that, right? You're not being paid to advertise. This is coming from your heart. You want to support your community, and I think maybe letting the whole world know that we're not doing these shout outs because we're paid to, we're doing them because they mean something.
Yeah, it's a good word. Any parting thoughts for the Facebook folks?
No, thank you for listening, and these ideas are not to be swallowed quickly. It takes time, and we shouldn't swallow them quickly. The reason we're in this position is because we haven't thought. So we've been given minds for a purpose, and that is to think. So just challenge us to continue loving God, not just with our heart and soul, but with our mind.
I'm super encouraged about learning new stuff. I'm super passionate about, especially at work, about trying to see in another man or woman their potential and what they could do, and giving them the platform and the freedom to excel and to thrive. And I think our government right now is doing just the opposite, not allowing us to thrive. And I think through education and through knowledge and through prayer and through the right heart and through getting with other people that are like-minded, like-hearted, and reading the right books from dead wise people will give us the tools and equipping. We are in store for a new season right now as these things continue. Even just yesterday, Supreme Court denying churches in California, upholding Governor Newsom's mandate of not being able to worship freely. I just encourage you to jump in, because I think in all of us is that quest. Eric said it to me yesterday, regardless of what you believe, we are after prosperity, freedom, and the pursuit of those freely. Without, it doesn't matter what we believe or what position or what color or what gender or what belief or period. So love you guys. Glad you tuned in. Share it. If you have somebody you know that needs or would like to sit down more, we'd love to talk to them. Have a great weekend.
Yes.